Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Reality Check Podcast. Tonight I am joined by the real deal made of steel Marcus. There he is. And below that, Raul Mas, coming in from Miami, from Coral Gables. So tonight's topic, Fauci, America's Orwellian test. So the thought behind that title is 1984. For those of you who are too young to know, 1984 was written in the 30s, and it was a futuristic dystopian novel of an American society run pretty much by hardline communists. That is where the term Big Brother comes from. For any of you who are wondering where Big Brother comes from, they literally had a TV in your room. You lived in these little tiny compartments, basically, and there was a giant eye on the TV, and it was watching you all the time. There was nothing you could do or say. They had full control over you. They not only could accuse you of actual physical crimes, they had a department that dealt with what they called thought crimes. And if you look at some of the crackdowns that occurred during the pandemic, it is very much the same thing. As a healthcare practitioner, I was forced to close down for 2 months, not completely closed down, thank God, because I'm in Florida, but I had to only see emergency patients. A couple of times I had to kind of stretch the definition of emergency for people that were going to be leaving. One guy was going to leave the state for good to move with his daughter, who was expecting a child in Pennsylvania. Imagine that. So I had to bring him in and get something done. But again, thank God we're in a state where DeSantis at least came to his senses and lifted that nonsensical Marxist totalitarian limitation of everybody's lives. Now, last week we heard Fauci do the fifth. 100, I think the count varies, over 100. I've heard 106, I've heard 111. The smirk on that motherfucker's face when he did that. You wanted to reach into the TV and throat punch him or squeeze that little pencil neck of his. I don't give a damn if he's 85. A lot of people are furious at this guy. And tomorrow, I believe, is a contempt vote. Now, my understanding is that the contempt vote would never pass in a full Senate. Thank you, John Thune. Thank you, Cassidy. Thank you, Cornyn, and Murkowski and all the other rhinos. They are disgusting people, all of them. Tom Tillis is another one. But I understand, and again, we'll go into that tonight, that Rand Paul has found a way to do it through committee, where we do have the votes and where we'll fly and go directly from committee to the DOJ to refer charges. Marcus, would you like to continue the topic, please?
Yeah, well, just to kind of tie in with what you mentioned about kind of Orwellian speech, President Eisenhower, in his last speech, his farewell address in 1961, what is commonly known as, beware the industrial complex. But he also expressed concern in science and technology as well, expressing concern about the potential for science and technology to dominate public policy, warning of the dangers of a scientific technological elite making decisions without adequate democratic oversight. And Eisenhower was very precedent on that. Going with just to kind of give the overview, uh, for me, I question the pardon, but for Biden, there was uh, 44,165 acts of clemency, 80 pardons under Biden, 1,500 clemencies in one day. And that was
Yeah,
like in December uh, 2024.
yeah.
My take is there is severe issues with the auto pen pardon, and we could go or into that later on. But there are other issues where uh, Fauci is not absolved of, which is uh, state violations, because the pardon is crimes against the United States, but this does not absolve himself from state or local government, where they have the same parallel laws with the federal statutes. So whether it's conspiracy or fraud, there are parallel laws to that. Then there are civil suits, and one of the things, uh, I think, one of the main reasons why he pled the fifth 111 times is to be sued by individuals or class action lawsuits. And him being, I don't know, like in his what 80s. Well,
85, I believe.
yeah. So that could be another issue. And then there's the issue about pleading the fifth under Title II, Section 192. You cannot plead a fifth in a congressional or Senate hearing. What you're doing is obstructing justice. And Steve Bannon and what's the other guy went to jail for that, for contempt, which has practical use. And then there's people concerned about maybe statute of limitations. There's a possibility where Fauci could be uh, cited for RICO. And then there's issues of conspiracy and crimes against humanity where there is no statute of limitations. So, like crimes against humanity, people who are part of the Nazi Party, even well into their 80s or 90s, got hauled off for trial for that. And conspiracy, all it takes is like more than one participant. Same thing as a RICO to get involved to establish that. And I would just like to pass on the baton to Raul.
Yeah. Look, I listened to most of the hearings, and I think like a lot of people, I was sort of shocked that the guy just taking the fifth over and over and over and over again. Obviously, on the advice of his attorneys, I thought it was entirely appropriate for Rand Paul to throw his attorney out when his attorney basically tried to get involved and speak when he was out of courtesy was allowed to sit next to Fauci, but was not called as a witness and therefore had no right to speak, and eventually got him thrown out of the hearing room. I think what struck me the most about this is, or what has really kind of like concerned me, is the fact that there now appears to be considerable evidence that Fauci lied when he testified before Congress about whether or not he funded gain of function research, whether they funded a lot of these experiments and clinics overseas. I think this guy basically covered up a lot of stuff that he didn't want to come out. I mean, he perjured himself on numerous occasions. I think he deserves all the criticism that he's getting. This is a very serious affair for our country. People were depending on him, and some of the stuff that he came up with, the 6 feet separation, and the court, all this stuff, as it turned out to be completely ineffective and just stuff that he made up, right? And here's a guy who has spent his entire life supposedly, in working in infectious diseases and stuff. And he's kind of been exposed as a fraud. He's been exposed as a liar. And yet, as Marcus alluded to, he has this, he's given this blanket pardon, right? That covers him up until, whatever. I mean, and now the question is, can he somehow be brought to justice? And as Marcus mentioned, this doesn't exempt him from state charges or class action lawsuits or other things. And I think that that's exactly what's going to happen. And I think his lawyers told him to plead the fifth, even though he probably couldn't plead the fifth because he already had a pardon, right? And so if you've got a pardon, there's no reason for you not to tell Congress what they want to hear, because you're not going to get penalized anyway. But I think he needed to keep his mouth shut precisely because of what Marcus mentioned, because there are other avenues where he can be attacked legally, whether through the state or through other mechanisms that they find. There are a lot of states like Florida that are now actually investigating him and seeing if he violated state laws and if he can be brought to justice in the state of Florida. This guy's going to be a nightmare, for the rest of his years on Earth, right? Does he deserve it?
Yes.
Probably. I mean, he dug himself into that. He dug his own grave. Call it bravado, call it gumption, call it whatever the hell you want, right? But I think he made some mistakes. He lied on several occasions. Um, he tried to deflect. He tried to distract. That people saw that pissing match. Initially, I saw that pissing match with Rand Paul as being political in nature, but the more I sort of read about it and the more this evidence came out about, I mean, and it's there in black and white. It's not like this is politics, right? I mean, the Democrats just want you to think that this is just politics as usual, the politics of destruction. No, it's not. I mean, there's now, plenty of evidence to suggest that this guy perjured himself, that he did, a lot of nefarious things. And to what end, really? And he brought enormous suffering to lots of people in this country. So I think there has to be, justice denied is, or justice delayed is justice denied. I mean, and he hasn't seen any repercussions from this, right? I mean, so it's tragic. It really is tragic.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on what you're just saying. First of all, why did he do it? Hubris. He's a sick little man. Trump also made, as Trump often does, way too much trust, way too much confidence. Trump gave that guy pretty much the accelerator pedal and the keys. He did not consult any other sources, and he was allowing, because in the beginning, Trump was still the president. He was allowing people to be shut down. Trump was the president for a good 8 months, actually 9 months, 10 months even, if you go through December of 2020. He did not protect people like Dr. Marty McCary, like Jay Bhattacharya, other individuals that were looking at alternatives, that were challenging that narrative. As far as the state, Udmeyer, the Florida Attorney General, state attorney, is going after him, I'm pretty sure there are other states that will follow suit. As far as damages, we don't expect that they're going to put an 85-year-old in prison, even though he does deserve it. I would be happy with him being. I don't know if you guys know who J. Bruce Ismay is. He became famous on the Titanic. He was the CEO, and he was aboard, and he snuck, put a rag over his head like a shawl, like he was a woman, and hopped on a lifeboat. And for the rest of his life, he had to live and cloistered as a pariah. No, because he survived when 2,500 people died. I want Fauci to be the next J. Bruce Ismay. I want him to be sued into insolvency. I want him to be sued into living under a damn bridge. That's what they need to do to him. Sue him for damages, and if they can put him in jail, fine, but it's unlikely. I think more likely is just suing for damages, because the damage he caused, he's a mass murderer. In my opinion, if you look at all the deaths from something that he helped create, the gain of function research, he was the architect of that, and he lied about that as well. Marcus, please continue.
There's two parts I want to talk about. One is, as a former federal employee, I dealt with a lot of fraudulent documents, and that this is one thing that is overlooked on the discussion about the pardon, because they said, well, it's a blanket pardon, can't be challenged, and I look at it completely different. It can be challenged. One, in terms of like looking at a fraudulent document, and I'll relate this to the pardon. You need to have a competent authority. Okay, like a divorce document. A judge is a competent authority. With Biden, we don't see a competent authority. I see him mentally challenged. So if a person has Alzheimer's, dementia, he shouldn't be a competent authority, because and you could also look at it as a document like if the mafia, you forced to sign over a document of your business. There's a level of coercion. That's not a valid document. Another thing about to be a valid document, aside from common authority, there's like no chain of custody. When I mentioned there was like 1,500 clemencies in one day, and that was a part of the Senate discussions and congressional, like was some of it was by some staffers putting in some names into the AutoPen registry where they got these clemencies. We don't know, because there was no chain of custody. Same thing like going back to a document like a divorce document. The chain of custody is the judge the court with the court stamp, and then the person receiving it, and it's registered. That is like a chain of custody. You don't see that with this auto pen deal. And another thing about the pardon is you have to list a crime. When it's vague over nothing, it's kind of invalid at its point because you have to establish a nexus. There's no nexus of a crime for a person to be pardoned of. So, and my take is you need like a pit bull district attorney, the type that a dog that goes after a bone to really pursue it. And what we've witnessed over these number of podcasts, like there's a level of reluctancy on behalf of government to really pursue things. So that's one thing I like to mention about that is I don't believe it's a valid pardon. It should be pursued. Another thing is about state filings. Trump, he's been pursued in New York, New Jersey, hosted a bunch of those for civil suits. So Fauci should be liable as well. And the thing is, what should it be based on? And my take is there's fraudulent medical practice as one issue. Second issue is a negligence as a public health administration official, which you could attribute to gross negligence. Another thing is misuse of public funds. The gain of function research was he allocated some of that money and diverted to China to the Wuhan lab, but also there was state funds as well. So the states could pursue that or should pursue that to say that's waste, fraud, and abuse. And
Trump is, particularly that COVID farce was created, the entire thing was to take down the Trump presidency, and it worked. It took him down. It allowed mail-in voting. It allowed Biden to hide in a basement. It allowed all of that. Okay, it allowed limited debates. Why, given that was probably the single nuke that nuked Trump the worst, why do you guys, either of you, think that the Trump team has been so hesitant to get somebody on there? I mean, Pam Bondi sure as hell wasn't going to do it. You know what I thought about her before I repeated what I've said about Pam Bondi. That's why she's gone. Why would they not get somebody to jump on that, given the egregiousness of it and the damage that it did, even on a personal, political basis to Trump, but also to this nation?
Yeah. I'll answer that briefly, man. I think what you're seeing here is, and I share the same frustration, Carlos. I mean, the one thing that really pisses me off about, almost 2 years into the Trump administration now is, we haven't seen heads rolling, right? I mean, where's the accountability for all this stuff that took place, over the last couple of years, including, a senile guy that they put into the presidency, an election that they probably stole. I mean, you can go on and on and on about, all this malfeasance that has been going on, and not a single person has been brought to account. And I think that for most, MAGA supporters, the most frustrating thing of all, man. I mean, we expected that by now, there'd be perp walks and people that would be having to, answer for a variety of different sins. But, they were all shielded by Biden. For whatever reason, the Senate, Trump himself, reluctant to pursue things. And it's almost like they themselves are now in the swamp, right? It's like you're there and you're trying to, not sink into it, but it just kind of like sucks you in, man. I mean, it's really unbelievable how corrupt, Washington, D.C. is, and how it's able to corrupt people that go in there to end the corruption, right? So, but I think, Marcus, what you mentioned about, how Trump spent all this time, in New York being chased by this attorney general. I think it's high time for the Republicans to take their playbook and use it against Fauci. Do the same thing, right? Listen, haul him into court in Florida, haul him into court in Texas, have this guy spend the rest of his natural life going from one hearing to another, having to pay legal fees, okay, having to, testify, okay, and eventually, I mean, I don't like to say this, but I mean, make life miserable for the guy, because he did in fact cause an enormous amount of pain and suffering, needless pain and suffering,
Okay.
um, and lied, not once but several times over about his old participation with Wuhan and where the virus came from. And it's not just scientific; it's not open for scientific debate anymore. I think that was a crutch that was being used initially. Everybody saw him as some sort of a demigod. I saw him as some sort of a demigod that was going to save us from all this stuff, right? Um, but now the evidence is out there, and there has to be a way to, um, the guy's got to suffer some consequences. And at the end of the day, I think the worst punishment for Fauci is that 20, 30 years ago, 20, 30 years from now, when we're long gone or whatever, and the actual history of this time is being written, and historians are looking at it, and they're going through those documents, they'll find out that this guy was not the savior that he was believed to have been, right? I mean, the truth will eventually come out. Maybe not now, maybe not this administration, maybe not the next administration, but 10, 15, 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, all that dirty laundry will come out, and history will know Fauci to have been a fraud and an extremely polarizing figure who lied multiple times in front of Congress, and caused enormous damage to the country. That will be his legacy.
Marcus, go ahead. You've been wanting to chime in.
So just going back to state filing. So I mentioned about fraudulent medical practice, negligent or gross negligence in the public health administration, misuse of public funds. Another aspect could be manslaughter. You see, like nursing homes closed, or they've put criminals and people who are sick with COVID in nursing homes, so you get a higher morbidity rate. And then he was a direct cause of funding the thing, and this is kind of segueing to like civil suits, which goes to state filing, in order to establish that Fauci is culpable. You have to establish proximate cause, that he was the linchpin, the thread that was a causal reaction for this. So I think with more investigations and corroborating with his diary could help establish that. So that's my take on it. And then another thing is like to go with like I said, if you need a DA, not on the state level, but also at a federal level to pursue this. My take is try to cite him for conspiracy, defrauding the government, and crimes against humanity. And Fauci would challenge it. He'll take it to the Supreme Court, which I think is needed, because with the Supreme Court, like the Constitution is just a framework. That's more like a skeleton. It was like a 1 or 2 sentence blurb for each right or amendment, and then it gets challenged, and the court established some boundaries or guidance on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So like the Second Amendment is constantly being challenged, but you know what? It's good that the court it takes to the courts just to ensure the rights are there. I believe the same thing as the pardon. The pardon should be challenged based on what I said before about it, to force the court to establish, hey, this can't be just a blanket pardon. It needs to have a competent authority, a chain of custody. You need to have clear violations for a pardon. At least have it grounded, because we won't get it. We won't get it through the legislator. And the thing is, this is like mental masturbation, but A federal DA should pursue RICO charges, conspiracy, crimes against humanity. With RICO, you need to be a willing participant in an enterprise. And with Fauci, he has a number of people working with him to make it a RICO case. And you need and you need proof that the enterprise existed. You need to have that it affected interstate commerce, and that is evident enough because so many businesses that got shuttered and got closed because of it. Uh, because a lot of businesses, their work on their profit is like very marginal, and this is like month to month. So for a business to close for 6 months, a lot of them close the stores forever because of it.
Let's do some more points, and let me with following what you're saying. Why is it not being acted upon? First of all, I look at Trump. I see his body language. He is exhausted. He is tired, and he's surrounded by a lot of milquetoast people that talk a good game but don't get it done. Those kind of and yeah, let's just say it, lawfare. But lawfare for true offenses, not lawfare because you didn't like the guy and you couldn't beat him in an election. They need to unleash the same thing on Fauci. But I have an old blue dog Democrat friend that always says this: "You Republicans, you treat elections like garden parties. The Democrats treat them like wars." I believe the same thing goes with litigation. Uh, by the way, the malpractice, uh, you wrongful death is a civil suit. It's not like even if your actions result in somebody's death, wrongful death. And I know this from my career in dentistry. Thank God I never had a wrongful death or any death. But you can take if somebody dies under your care, and we're talking about millions of people under his care. Just today, and I was trying to find the name. One of his closest people confirmed that it was the Wuhan lab, which he lied about. Uh, the reason he led the fifth so many times last week also, he knew that the Republicans were setting a perjury trap for him. That's why he did it. But again, it's got to be someone like Harmeet Dillon. But Harmeet Dillon can't take up every case. If you guys remember the Cloward Piven strategy, you remember who that is? It's a couple, liberal couple. Their strategy, their theory is if you overwhelm a system with just too much shit, basically no plumber, figuratively speaking, can keep up with it, and you overwhelm the system with so many challenges. I think, and there's also, Marcus, activist judges. All those actions that you described, which are so necessary and so justifiable, Trump will run into, as he already has, a lot of activist judges. He's got to do these things in a red state where activist judges cannot say Fauci. Go ahead.
Going back to RICO, for a RICO crime to stick, you need to prove that two crimes occurred within 10 years. And the thing is, and part of it is like, the criteria is like, mail fraud, wire fraud, certain forms of obstruction of justice, witness tampering, destruction or falsification of records, and obstructing an investigation. So with that, uh, I think there is a potential pathway for RICO because he obstructed investigation and there's a destruction of evidence and witness and whatchamacallit, obstruction of justice by pleading the fifth. So that's my take.
What would be the first step to pursue that, though, to start down the road to
You need
handling
to
that?
have a DA who's willing to go. Yeah, even though Rand Paul made a criminal referral for contempt, like I said, I'm talking on a different pursuit: RICO, conspiracy, misuse of public funds, all that stuff. Just stack it and let the DA run with it. He's gonna challenge it with the pardon. It gets taken up to Supreme Court. They make a decision on it, where they're going to say the pardon's valid or not, and then pursue the case. Because once it's in the docket, there is no expiration until it's concluded. So
Look, oh, I found it. Let me just, and then we'll go to Rob. Biden COVID czar finally admits virus came from Chinese lab. Dr. Ashish Jain, the former White House COVID-19 response coordinator, now says the origin of the coronavirus pandemic was likely a lab leak from the Wuhan from Wuhan rather than a natural outbreak. He made the comments recently and described how this thinking has shifted. This is going to surprise some people. When I went to the White House, my view was this was almost surely a natural outbreak, maybe a lab leak. Based on information I've learned since, I've come to the conclusion it is more likely to have been a lab leak. We still need transparency and accountability on this. So that's who I was talking about.
Transparency and accountability,
Yeah.
they go hand in hand. We haven't seen we've seen some transparency, but we haven't seen the accountability. That's the problem. That's the big letdown, really. Um, it just the swamp continues to morph and survive and mutate and continue on. It's remarkable.
You say that the swamp does this thing, and disgustingly, admittedly, it does. But you give you sometimes they can be attacked. Case in point, we just got a new guy today as the DNI, right?
Hmm.
Jay, I can't remember his last name now. Was just confirmed today. But until then, there was an interim DNI. His name is Bill Pulte. You guys may remember that the Democrats were reacting like the scene in the Exorcist when the priest starts sprinkling holy water on the demon, on the possessed girl. They just went ballistic over this Bill Pulte. And I was thinking, what is this kryptonite that this guy has? Well, I know why. Bill Pulte pulled 30% of the DNI, removing a bunch of plants, a bunch of people that were deep staters.
Yeah.
So it can be assaulted, it can be assailed, it can be dealt with, but it takes balls. And apparently Bill Pulte had a pretty stainless steel set of them, which is why they feared him like no other. I'm hoping that this new guy
Carlos, look,
who's on
yeah,
will do the same.
the Democratic Party right now is in complete meltdown, right? On the one hand, a lot of their first of all, the deep state, like you say, a lot of their spies, or what are we going to call them, people that they had in the deep state, firmly entrenched in there and maintaining democratic policies, even through Republican administrations. I mean, trying to find ways to subvert the will of Trump and anybody else that's in power in order to maintain the sort of same liberal mindset over and over again. A lot of those people have now lost their jobs. They're out of power. There's still, a lot of them still hanging around, quietly, keeping their heads down. But there have been some consequences to them. The whole government has been downsized considerably. And then the other thing is, a lot of the funding that the Democratic Party was receiving, okay, through these massive grants that they would issue to these NGOs that would eventually come back to benefit, their own people, including people that didn't even need the money, like Soros. I heard a story today that just kind of, sent a chill up my neck about how USAID money was used to basically funnel fund into Soros-led initiatives. Okay, that and that's now been curtailed. So there's just been an incredible amount of corruption and double dealing and funding of nefarious funding and fraud. I mean, that's basically fraud, right? Where you're giving money supposedly for U.S. international assistance, and you're using it to line the pockets of your own lobbyists in D.C. and your own campaign contributors and things of that sort. That is, that's horrendous, right? But so the Democrats are feeling that, and then on the other side is they got these crazy DSA people, the Democratic Socialists, that are pretty, they're becoming the face of the Democratic Party. So they're being clobbered on the financial side. They're being clobbered by loss of a lot of their assets and their agents, if you will, in the deep state. On the other hand, they've got the Democratic Socialists saying, well, you haven't done enough, and you're too weak, and you're too complacent, and you really need to take on Trump more aggressively. I think the tragic thing about this is that the Democratic Party is truly weakened, but Trump now is mired in this mess in Iran, right? Um, he's coming across really poorly in terms of, on again, off again, on again, off again. This is supposed to be a campaign that was going to last, 60, maybe 90 days max. Here we are, in August. There's still no end in sight. The Iranians are still lobbing missiles, maybe not that many of them, but they're still causing chaos, right? And so Trump at this point should have been in the driver's seat. Iran should have been taken care of. It should have been another notch, on the Trump victory column, if you will. But that hasn't happened. Okay, it's causing a drag on the economy. By the way, the economy is not doing that well. Okay, I mean, I don't care how high the stock market has gotten. Which, by the way, if you look at the indices, stock market, S&P 500, NASDAQ, they're all more or less 10% up year to date. Okay, the NASDAQ was actually up closer to 16, 17% in June. It's taken a bit of a pause because there's been, despite the enormous amount of money that's being poured into artificial intelligence chasing AI, there's a lot of investor skepticism as to whether the rewards for literally over $1 trillion in investments are going to be there. I think the financial markets are on shaky ground, quite frankly. I would not be surprised if you saw, a major downturn in the not too distant future when a lot of the promises of AI don't come about. The latest GDP growth numbers, 1.5%. What was the prediction? At least 3%. So, we're not hitting our targets in terms of GDP growth, and we haven't even seen the negative effects of this, increase in oil prices really filtering through yet, right? But those will make the problems even worse, right? As we get there, and these tariff wars, right? I mean, my God, man, if you're an importer, how the hell can you run a business with this kind of volatility going on? 1 minute, kind of the same way he's running the war in Iran. 1 minute, oh my God, 100% tariffs on Canada. The next minute they're gone. He picks a fight with the Europeans, then he makes amends, right? I mean, this guy is mercurial, to say the least, right? And people say, well, it's the art of the deal. He's doing it on purpose to keep the Iranians, uncertain about what he's going to do next. Listen, I don't buy that shit. There's just a lot of confusion, and that confusion is starting at the very, very top. Okay, and it's permeating down, and nobody, everybody in this government is petrified. I mean, look at what's happening now with what's her name, Judge U.S. Jeanine Pirro, right? All of a sudden, this is a woman who's basically been one of his strongest supporters, for Christ's sake.
He trashed her.
And now all of a sudden he's trashing her because she's saying, hey, there's not enough evidence to convict this guy of ruining the reflecting pool. What the hell do you expect her to do? Make shit up? I mean, the prosecutor just can't make stuff up. You can't just prosecute someone if there's not sufficient evidence to do so.
I would disagree. Look at Alvin Bragg and.
Well, yeah, but you know what? But Pirro's not like that. I mean, she's got she's been a judge. She knows the law, right? I mean, she's not going to do that. That's not who she is, right? My point is, there is chaos in the White House. Okay, he's confusion, whatever. I think you're right, Carlos. You also mentioned he looks exhausted, right? He's not getting any younger. Okay. And I think it's beginning to show, it's beginning to affect his performance, and all that permeates down because nobody wants to confront Trump and say, hey, Mr. President, we really ought to do things differently, because shit, you'll be fired the next day, right? So you can't run a government surrounded by people that are just all yes men and telling you what you want to hear, right? I mean, I think the president has a handful of people that do try and that do have his ear and do try and talk to him and reason with him. But I think this whole mess with Iran has really not worked out the way he wanted it to work out. The economy's not doing as well as it was supposed to go to happen. The military, we destroyed an enormous amount of their capacity, right? But obviously not enough to permanently put them in the doghouse. Okay, there's still causing trouble. We've lost, there's frayed relationships now between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia and our partners in the region because, they're wanting the war to end as well. So I don't know. It is a mess right now. Okay, where it should have been smooth sailing for the president. The irony of all this is you look at the president's approval ratings of the Republican Party, it's over 80%. Okay, so people, and myself included, we're still rooting for the guy. Okay, but he's got to, get his own mind in order, get his own house in order. Okay, and think more clearly. And if you're going to destroy Iran, destroy Iran. Stop with this fucking back and forth. We're on, we're off. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to destroy you. My God, man. I mean, talk about, changing your mind. It's not even every 24 hours. It's like every 24 minutes, it seems, stop already, get a grip.
How many last, he's given, I've lost count of the last chances. I see two obstacles too, that the Democrat Party is trying to implode, and we're saving them with all this nonsense. I've always said this, so you guys have heard me say it before, I'll say it again. The biggest threat to the United States of America is the stupidity of too many American people. They don't understand. This sucks, this is horrible, but if you punish them at the ballot box, the alternative is going to be far worse. They don't see that. The other issue is that we have there's a culture now that exists, and I hope I'm not offending anyone in the military when I say this, but once upon a time, a military person would get, obviously, the benefits they richly deserve. They would get uh, pensions, they would get VA loans, they would get all the things that the least that they should receive. But now it's like we want all that, but there's this idea that we're not expected to fight and put our life on the line. Marcus, as a member of the military, a former member, I cannot imagine that all those young men and women that are out there in the Strait of Hormuz or in that region don't want to fight and don't want to go to war. And what I'm talking about, I'm just going to say it, the gorilla in the room. If you don't have a ground invasion to take out the IRGC, targeted, joined up with the Mossad, with the IDF, this will never end, and that's why nobody wanted to mess with Iran. Your take on that?
I'm just going to give it my take as an analogy. Okay, you treat a war like a fight. Like if you're going to go boxing, you want to go in the ring and not win. Are you willing to take punches and not try to defeat the person? And that's like the frustrating part with the Korean conflict or Vietnam. The Afghanistan, we did not play to win. We go on in the boxing ring or MMA, and we're dealing with an opponent, but we're not trying to take them out completely. But we're willing to get punched or kicked in return. That's why do you want to play? Why do you want to play that type of boxing or MMA? That's I'm just trying to put it in a very simple sense. The aim of warfare is to win. And you don't put any other factor into that.
Yeah. Look, I don't, Carlos. I don't blame the guys. I don't blame the troops. I blame the leadership, and that leadership begins with a commander-in-chief, because at the end of the day, the commander-in-chief is the head of all of our military forces, and he sets the tone. And I think Trump, from the very beginning, thought that he could win this war by air power and air power alone. And his generals told them, yeah, we think we can do it as well, right? Yes, sir. We'll do it. We'll bomb the hell out of them, and we'll have positive results. But it didn't work out that way. And I don't want to suggest that we should have sent in ground troops, but obviously what we've tried so far hasn't worked. Now, what we don't know, okay, and that some people have alluded to, is that there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of clandestine action that's taking place, a lot of other plans that are being drafted to, promote regime change. There might be arms that are being smuggled in, all sorts of stuff that we're not privy to. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that the war plan that was implemented has been effective, but it has not gotten the desired result, which is to quash the enemy's ability to continue to cause havoc in the Middle East. If anything, that havoc has increased since the war began, as opposed to being stifled, right? So I think you have to look in the mirror and say, this hasn't worked. This hasn't worked, and we need to find something else to do, or are we going to find ourselves in yet another quagmire, right? The horrible word that nobody likes to say. We're going to be in this Middle East quagmire, and the conflict's going to continue to spread and continue to get worse, and the Houthis are not going to get involved, and we're going to ruin our relationship with Saudi Arabia because they're on the receiving end of a lot of those missiles and drones, and we started this and we didn't finish it. So there's all sorts of stuff that's going on, and I think that Trump is just under a lot of pressure, and I think he's made some mistakes, and the big mistake has been going back and forth and changing your mind, from one day to the next. It does not exude command authority. It does not exude, I've got a handle on this. He tries to make you think he's got a handle on it, and he talks tough in front of a crowd, and we're gonna hit him hard and blah blah blah, and 24 hours later it's like, okay, we're making progress on a deal. We got to focus on a deal. And well, wait a second, what the hell happened? 24 hours ago, you told us we were gonna, bomb into the Stone Age, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're working on a deal again. I mean, really, this is not a good look for the President of the United States. It's not a good look for the United States of America, where our allies are scratching their heads, saying, where the hell is all this going to end? Okay, where are we going? And I think there needs to be more coherent thinking. But by the way, yet another thing, because of the chaotic nature of the president, okay, the communications of the White House, and we've got this great young, what's her name, the spokesperson for the White House,
Caroline Levitt.
Yeah, Caroline Levitt. I think she does a great job. Okay, but she's one person. Okay. There is, this guy needs an army of PR people to clean up his mess, okay? And it's his mess, And guess what? Those people don't exist in the administration. There's Caroline Levitt, who comes out and very forcefully defends and, justifies everything the president does, but she's one person, okay? You need a dozen Caroline Levitts and bulldogs that are out there and confronting the press right and left, and going on Sunday talk shows and defending everything this administration does. But even when people attempt to do that on behalf of the president, they go on a Sunday news talk show and they defend the president, and don't worry, he's got a handle on this. And the next day, he changes his mind again, and and why is he taking it out on Piro now? I mean, do you really at this stage need to pick a fight with one of your most ardent supporters? I mean, what are you thinking? I mean, is your skin that thin that the fact that she doesn't prosecute some guy that messed up your pool just throws you over the edge? Come on, man, get a grip, really. I mean, this is a pimple on the elephant's ass. I mean, forget about it. The pool is a pool. Okay, it looks great. It looked great on the 4th of July. finish fixing it up and move on, right? So anyway.
Yeah, more important, first of all, I want to also clarify what I said earlier. I do not blame the boots. I blame the suits. I said that I can't imagine for the life of me that the people that are out there stationed are not eager to fight. I believe that they are. But the
Mhm.
problem is, you got a guy that needs to shut the fuck up. Every other day, their navy's underwater, the bottom of the sea. They took out their air force. We have full air superiority. Even a Democrat, General Ford, who's a moderate Democrat, he always says the president needs to start talking and start bombing or whatever else he's got to do. He's gotten in over his head, and that's where the stupidity of the people come in. If you get a person who is not allowing, they have it. When I said that this attitude that the military shouldn't have to be asked to put their life in the line and fight, meaning ground forces, I believe firmly any military person I've heard that seems to know what they're talking about with experience has said the same thing. And unless there's some long project underneath to undergird that regime, you need ground forces, whether it's just us and the Israelis, but that needs to happen. When you have a culture, and again, it's the population that thinks, well, our military, we can't take any casualties. If you're not willing to go into combat, maybe the military is not for you. I mean, I wouldn't. Of course, I'm 70 years old. Nobody wants me in the military. But the point is, yeah, the point is that I don't buy that they're unwilling to. They're saying, like the old mafia movies, comandate, give me the order, sir. Don Corleone, and I will go. I don't see Trump giving the order, and that's a problem. And you talk about his cabinet. How about Sefton? How about Pete? What the fuck is he doing? I haven't heard much from Pete lately. Did you notice that? He's been quiet as a church mouse.
Well, perhaps he should be quiet because um, he's the Secretary of War, and the war isn't going that well right now. So he's probably keeping a low profile because it wouldn't surprise me if he's skating on thin ice these days. It wouldn't surprise me one bit to wake up tomorrow or the next day and find that Trump has fired Hegseth and brought somebody else in. Would it surprise any of you? I would.
Why would he fire Hegseth?
Huh?
Not that he needs a logical reason. Trump has been pretty irrational lately. Why would he fire the Secretary of War?
Because the Iranians are still in power, right? I mean,
Because
hey,
not because of Pete.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you very well, Carlos.
They're in power. They're still in power because Trump doesn't want to take casualties, and they have called his bluff, and he has been outsmarted by the Iranians. They're evil motherfuckers, okay, but they're not stupid, and he
Right.
has been outsmarted, and he is demonstrating. Much as it pains me to say this, it makes me sick, but he is proving why former presidents did not want to fuck with Iran. That is
Right.
just a sad reality. And I fear the repercussions of that going into the upcoming elections.
Well, I think you are going to see changes in the War Department, and it may very well. He may not fire Hegseth, but Hegseth might suddenly decide that he needs to spend more time with his family, or whatever, and bows out gracefully, and they bring somebody else in, and maybe some of the generals, maybe Raisin Kane, takes retirement as well, because I have a hard time believing that Trump went to war, um, without a conviction that it was going to work, that it was going to, that his plan was going to work, and it didn't work. And the plan that he didn't put together that plan, the generals did, and the generals in Hegseth presented it to him and said, "Here are your options." He picked the one that he preferred. But I think they all, probably had a pretty rosy outlook, and the one that the president picked hasn't really worked that well. And I think he didn't want to pick the other ones because they did involve, putting troops on the ground and potentially higher casualties. Trump remember that Trump spent, he spent most of his adult life arguing against endless wars, right? And criticizing, Bush going into Iraq and stuff. And so that's like his kryptonite. He wants to stay away from having to commit ground troops and getting bogged down in a war. But that fear has come with a cost. And that cost is the fact that he's now in a stalemate with Iran, right? So you gotta, he's in a situation where you gotta shit or get off the pot, man. Okay, call it a day. Negotiate the best deal you can with Iran, and take your licks at the polls come November, because that will certainly happen. People are disenchanted. So.
Marcus, as a subject matter expert on military action, certainly greater than either of us, when you have a battle plan, a war plan, a strategy, and it doesn't work, I'm sure in World War II we had similar setbacks, but you change, you adapt, like the old Marine thing, adapt, improvise, overcome. You change your strategy. Would not those generals have the wherewithal and the experience to say, Mr. President, this is not working, we need to do such and such? Or is it that the only way they can pivot is ground forces, and he refuses? What do you think?
My take is that with any plan, there's always a contingency plan to go with it. So if it fails to reach an objective, you have backups to either go to win a secondary objective or whatnot. So that's my take. It's a plan is not like a one size fit all. It morphs, but you always have. If this happens and we do this, if this happened, we do this. It's not a fixed thing, but yeah.
Yeah. It's actually the last thing I imagine that any war in history, I mean, I'm talking about like from Peloponnesian to now, that any war went perfectly step by step, like assembling a cabinet or something, right? Or a golf.
Schwarzkopf would say it did for him with Desert Storm.
Well, that'd be about it. But yeah, because the other one was a clusterfuck. It cost Bush the House, the Senate. It cost him. It brought Obama into power. That was a disaster. Clearly, for the last while, we are talking about morph. We went from Fauci to the Iran quagmire, which is, I suppose, unavoidable. We should probably start bringing this thing home. You guys have any parting thoughts? Go ahead, Marcus, and then Raul, so we can wrap this baby up.
Yeah, just for me, two things. I want to get into another entity that should be held accountable would be China. And the thing of it is, as a state actor, they could always declare like qualified immunity to individuals. Not to, and the thing is, if a state wants to sue a country, they could say, well, screw you. They could take it to the international court to make it more binding. But I'm a son of a bitch, so I think a little differently. I go, if you want to make China accountable, do it as form of a tax or tariff, as a restoration of people's losses and businesses as well. And maybe other countries would follow suit, but right now China's not being held accountable to wrecking. I don't know how many deaths has caused, like a few million, but untold billions of dollars lost. Another thing is to pressure Fauci, even though he technically has immunity, which I believe is not a valid thing. Go after the underlings. There's too many people who participated. Make them accountable, and then somebody is going to talk. Somebody's going to point where the bodies are. Somebody's going to show where the server or the emails. I play hardball.
Raul, on that point, maybe it was as part of your wrap up here. Just today, I read just a quick blip Chiron. Alan Dershowitz, vaunted law professor Alan Dershowitz, recommended exactly what Marcus just suggested. He recommended that the DOJ give Fauci immunity to testify. What do you think?
Well, he already has immunity from that pardon.
No, from further litigation, from further incrimination. In other words, we won't do any of this stuff at the states, whatever, but you got to talk. That's what I think he meant.
I don't know, man.
The public won't like it.
I don't think it's going to fly. But look, like I said before, I think he should spend the rest of his natural life, fighting off legal challenges here and there, and and history will record him as being, a fraudster and a petty guy that power got to his head, and did a lot of stupid things that he couldn't justify and tried to cover his tracks. That will be the ultimate penalty for him. But,
revoke his medical license.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things you can do, right? I mean, but I don't think he's going to end up spending any time in jail. I really don't. That's not going to happen. But look, this conversation, and especially this talk about what's going on, and I know that we started off Fauci, we ended up in talking about Iran, but man, the world is a really messed up place right now. We got a war going on in Ukraine, we got a war in the Middle East. We have this incredible, dissension, here at home. We have elections coming up. We have an economy that really is not hitting on all cylinders. We've got, high gasoline prices, tons of volatility certainly in the commodity markets. A lot of fears that all these trillions that we're pouring into AI may not, in fact, have the return on investment we thought there was. I think, there's a lot of things, a lot of bad undercurrents, or even not even undercurrents. I mean, we actually see the ripple effects of them all over the place. And I'm really starting to get concerned that this golden age that the president has promised us may not be so gold. It might be fool's gold. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I hope not. I hope I'm wrong. But we're going into election season. Like I said, Trump still has a lot of popularity within the Republican Party. We have a very narrow grip on the House of Representatives. If we lose the House, Trump's agenda is basically completely stilted for the remaining 2 years of his term. And on top of that, they're going to drag him back into court and impeach him and launch their own investigations and all this stuff, and we'll have even more gridlock than we have right now, right? So
and then say hello to President Rubio. They do that, say hello to President Rubio.
Well, we'll see.
All right, so with that, we're going to be ending off. My last parting thought is, as bad as things are now, and things are effed up, just remember this, voters, if you punish the people that you hold responsible for that and put the other people in place, it can get worse.
Oh, yeah.
With that, I bid you good night.